All that matters is a live baby in the bassinet. And what happens to that baby, that mom, and that mom's future babies doesn't matter to the system. It's not that the doctors in the system or the nurses in the system are evil. It's that they are just sort of pawns.
Welcome to The Discerning Mother, the podcast for Jesus-loving moms who want to tune out the noise and tune into God's design for motherhood. I'm Brigid, a board-certified women's health coach, holistic health practitioner, birth nerd, and homeschooling mom of 5. I help moms to heal their minds and bodies, trust their instincts, and embrace the beauty of the way God created them. Here we talk about birth, hormones, motherhood, faith, and anything else. Let's go. Well, welcome back to the Discerning Mother podcast. I'm so excited to be here today with Dr. Stu. He is an obstetrician who has worked extensively with complex births, breeches, twins, all the things. I don't want to give his intro, though, because he has so much. So, Dr. Stu, I'd love to welcome you and just have you give a little bit of an intro about yourself.
Okay. Hi, Brigid. Good morning, and thank you for having me on and allowing me to speak to your audience. I'm an obstetrician. I was classically trained. I went to University of Minnesota Medical School. I'm originally from Minnesota, and I matched my residency at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. And I started my residency in 1982. For many of you, you probably weren't alive. And I spent 4 years there. And as part of my training, we were lucky because we were affiliated with LA County USC Women's Hospital, which was in the early 80s, the busiest hospital in the United States. They were doing about 22,000 births a year there, which averaged about 65 babies a day. I spent 4 months there, and I was there every other day. So that's 60 days. You can do the math of how many births I saw when I was a resident. Now, I didn't obviously see all of them because we had a team, but if we're seeing 65 babies a day, we're seeing, 2 to 3 breeches a day, we're seeing 1 or 2 sets of twins a day. It really just became routine and normal. And it was an era that was different than it was now. We didn't have the ethical considerations that are put in place now. We were very well trained in the hands-on parts of obstetrics, which is a problem in today's training because there isn't enough surgery, there isn't enough technology in obstetrics for OBs to learn things. And so the skills that I learned have sort of disappeared. I went into private practice. I was a very medicalized OB. I did all the things that I sort of mock now. And I had the good fortuitous event that happened in my life where I was approached by local midwives shortly after I finished my residency and started my practice and asked if I would take their home birth transports. And this began me on a path that I never knew. I never saw it coming, never knew it was going to happen. That began to unravel from my brain the indoctrination that I had as a resident, that everything that I did was to save lives and it was the only way of doing things. It's like the military. There's one way of doing things. And that's very much what it's like in residency. You don't have the time or the bandwidth or the energy to step out of the box. You just want to get through your days. You want to get through your years. You want to finish your residency. You want to get out and make money and do things. And again, it was a different era in medicine then too. I came out and started a private practice solo with no patients. And I just had to build my practice. So I hustled and I covered emergency rooms. I covered free clinics. I backed up doctors when they were on vacation. I assisted them in surgery. And slowly but surely, I built up my practice. And I was approached by midwives to take their home birth transports. And I just saw that as a source of revenue. I did not see it as some traditional innate wisdom. I just probably, if I can't remember specifically, but I probably thought home birth was dangerous or stupid because that's sort of what we were trained in the training programs. But the midwives taught me a lot of things as I began to spend time with them. And as I said, they began to unravel the indoctrination that I had, and I began to question things as simple as, when a baby's born, why does it go to the warmer? Just a simple thing. It's like,
yeah.
Why am I wearing a full hazmat suit? Why is she on her back with drapes covered over her legs as if I'm about to take out, her gallbladder or something like that? Why am I washing off her bottom with iodine? Why am I immediately cutting the cord? Why am I doing these things? Why am I telling a woman she needs to be induced because she's diabetic when she's perfectly well controlled? These things did not occur to me. They were, if you never experience them, you don't know anything. And that's the problem with one of the many problems with our system today is that everyone's in their own silo. and there's no mixing of the silos. And OBs are never really exposed to what midwives do other than when they bring in a transport that may or may not be a problem, and that's their only exposure. And so there's a misunderstanding that goes on between the two. And so I was sort of practicing in the hospital for about 10 years. And then I realized that it's a really funny thing. It was an economic thing. It's like being a solo practitioner, when you take a vacation, say the vacation costs you $10,000 to take your family on vacation. It really costs you $40,000 because you have overhead in your office that continues and you have no revenue generation. So again, we're not very good businessmen, and obstetrics is a business. So somebody encouraged me to get what's called physician extenders. Physician extenders could be like a PA or midwife or nurse practitioner or somebody to work in your office. So when you're not there, revenue is still being generated. And so I did it for that reason. I had two midwife friends. We started a collaborative practice, and we practiced the next 15 years, we practiced a really good style of collaborative medicine between midwife and doctor. It was all hospital-based, but we had a really good data. We had about a 7% C-section rate. Midwives took care of all the normal stuff. The well-woman exams, the prenatal visits, the normal deliveries. And if a woman had an ectopic pregnancy, or she had an abnormal pap smear, or she needed a breech delivery, or she needed a C-section, that would be, I would step in. And our statistics in the same community as many other doctors were so much better. But you'd think at that point that the hospital would be thrilled to have somebody who's having good outcomes and low C-section and low intervention rates and low epidural rates and early discharge rates and things like that. But you'd be wrong, because the hospital's motivation is completely different from an independent doctor's motivation. Hospital's motivation is to make money. And you make a lot more money when you have everyone getting an epidural, when you have everyone staying 2 or 3 days, when you have high C-section rates. And so eventually what happened is they started to use what are called sham peer review techniques to get rid of our practice. And at first they banned the midwives, and they banned VBAC, and then they were going to ban breech delivery. And I was sort of outspoken. I was probably a bit obnoxious with these people because I probably didn't respect them very much. And so it came down, not that we had any bad outcomes that were worthy of being expelled from the hospital, but every 2 years, your privileges are up for renewal. And it's like a private club. You belong to a club, and for whatever reason, as long as you can't prove discrimination, they can decide that you're no longer a member of our club. And that's what they did. And so I was forced into home birthing. Fortunately, because I developed a relationship over the 25 years that I was practicing with the local midwives. And they encouraged me, when they heard about my dilemma, to go into home birthing. And so I did. And it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. And then I got bolder, and I began not only doing vaginal deliveries of head-down babies, but vaginal deliveries of breech babies, vaginal deliveries of twin babies. Questioning, why does somebody with stable hypertension or a really well-controlled diabetic, why does she have to be induced at 38 weeks and have her baby go to the NICU? Why? And then when I started thinking like that, I started to realize that pretty much everything I did as a resident and everything that's taught in residency was either totally wrong or certainly not the only option. And yet that's the way it's presented to women. And if they choose to go outside what they're presented, then they're considered a non-compliant patient, or they're considered, that they don't care about their baby, that they're putting their baby in danger. And the whole thing, the use of coercion to get people to do something, despite the fact that the use of coercion in any form is completely unethical. And every 3- and 4-letter organization has a statement on coercion and ethics. And these doctors and hospital systems who tell you that they're doing evidence-based medicine and they're following the standard of care, they completely ignore the recommendations of these organizations regarding ethics. And so we end up with the situation we are today, where we have, when I started, the C-section rate was in single digits. Now it's 33, 34% in our country. In some countries, it's 50, 60, 70%. When I started, induction was very rare. So again, single digit. Now it's about 30% of women. When I started, maybe a woman had 1 or 2 ultrasounds in her pregnancy, and maybe half of women didn't have any. Now there isn't a woman that goes through her pregnancy without an average 2, 3, 4 ultrasounds. Continuous fetal monitoring was was already in play in the early 80s, but it's been around now for more than 50 years and it's not done what they told you it was going to do. The Fischbein curve is a way, that's how we measure your progress in labor. And they have to use vaginal exams in order to get points on the curve. And the Fischbein curve is completely flawed thinking. To briefly say that in order to plot a curve, you have to have a lot of women, a lot of vaginal exams, and then you have a scattergram, and then the curve is the median of the scattergram. And they came along and said Fischbein's curve was that this is how fast a primip should dilate. And if you failed to dilate that fast, then you were considered moving too slow, and you needed to have something done, like ruptured membranes or start Pitocin. But if you go back to the original graph, 50% of women were below the median. So what this Fischbein curve decided was that 50% of women were laboring too slow. That's crazy. And yet these things became the standard in the medical world. And I began, because of the midwives on whose coattails I walked, began to realize that pretty much everything that's done is wrong. And some of it is intentional, some of it is accidental, but none of it's acceptable. Yeah. And if they, there's enough evidence out there for them to realize what they're doing isn't the only option, and yet they ignore that evidence. So if there's an ethical situation in my profession, it's not doctors and midwives who help women give birth at home. It's what's going on in the hospital.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so good. One of the big things that a lot of my clients that I work with, they typically start out having a hospital birth. Things go very, very awry, like not the way that they desired at all. And then they end up with tons of trauma and all the other stuff that we work through. And then usually whenever they get pregnant again, they're like, I cannot go back to the hospital. Like, I can't do it. I'm going to do a home birth instead. And a lot of them struggle. And I know I personally did as well whenever I was shifting from that hospital to home birth. And a lot of them struggle with that confidence to really take that step. And so whenever you were saying how you saw the shift from your practice to supporting midwives as more of like a source of revenue, but I'm sure that there must have been some people who were saying like, you're crazy, that this, like, why are you doing this? Like, it probably wasn't as cut and dry as maybe you have made it seem. So how did you find the courage to like step out of the box to move into supporting these midwives, even if people did think that you were crazy? I know, again, you had the money side of it, but what else was there?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. A lot of my colleagues, even the guys I shared office space with, were very polite about it, but they admitted that they would never do something like that. They think it's too risky. And I said, these women are low risk, but it didn't matter. I was always a little bit of a contrary person. And one of the things that I was very lucky with was that I came out of residency in an era where doctors still controlled their own practices, and doctors were the ones that had the patients. And I was independent. Yes, I had medical malpractice insurance, and yes, I had licensing by the medical board, and yes, I had to have my privileges, but I could still make my own decisions. I didn't have a boss. I didn't have an organization filled with risk managers and administrative people who have business degrees telling me that I have 8 minutes per patient and that I have to induce everyone by 41 weeks, eventually 39 weeks, whatever number you want to come up with, that I couldn't do breech delivery, that I had to do this, everyone had to have a glucose screen, everyone had to have a GBS screening. I got to individualize my care. And I think that suited me really, really well. I don't work well in a system where I'm working for people that I have little respect for. And even if that sounds arrogant, I think everyone listening should actually feel that way.
Yeah.
You shouldn't sacrifice your ethics to keep your job. Mm-hmm. And most of my OB colleagues now are employees. They've changed it. The medicalized system realized that they cannot control things when they don't control the patient lives.
Mm-hmm.
Doctors can take their patients to a hospital, and the hospital's mean to that doctor. The doctor can say, okay, I'm taking my practice over to your competitor over there. Well, hospitals figured that that's not a great system. So what they did over the next 20 years was they brought in managed care, and they became the owners of the patients' lives.
Yeah.
And they hired the doctors, and the doctors became essentially just salaried employees working a shift. And what power do you have when you're a salaried employee that by law in those days you could not unionize? So you had zero power. And you were done what you told because you had debt, you had family, you had children going to school, you had loans to pay off. You couldn't just stand up and say something and possibly get fired. So you told the line, even if you knew that you were doing things that were unethical, like telling women that they all have to be delivered before 40 weeks or 41 weeks or whatever, when you know perfectly well that it's perfectly safe to go beyond that. If it in the proper setting, right? There's always going to be an if and a but and an anecdotal story of someone who thinks their life was saved because of the things the hospital did. And that is true. But what people who think like that don't think of is how many women were harmed because the same testing or intervention that saved their life or their baby's life caused the other woman to have unnecessary procedures and trauma that she didn't need.
Yeah.
That led to the baby having problems and ending up in the NICU and not breastfeeding well and ending up with a different microbiome. 2 years later, having, autoimmune problems, and the mother having depression postpartum and having other things. When you look at any paper on obstetrical outcomes, those things I just mentioned are never part of it. All that matters is how did the baby do? Did the baby live? Did the baby die? And maybe the C-section rate. How the mother did afterwards isn't part of those papers either. Just go and read any major paper on obstetrics and look at the material and method section and look at what the outcomes they measured were. And that's the thing. And I know you were smiling because I was about to say my usual go line, which is all that matters is a live baby in the bassinet. And what happens to that baby, that mom and that mom's future babies doesn't matter to the system. It's not that the doctors in the system or the nurses in the system are evil. It's that they are just sort of pawns. Some of them know they're pawns. A lot of them prefer not to know they're pawns. There's a cognitive dissonance that goes on because I don't believe these people are bad.
Yeah.
So if they're doing bad things, they have to rationalize a reason why they're doing them.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I was going to say is that you brought up the studies, which are fine and great, but also just anecdotally, if you go and ask like a woman who just had a baby or any woman who's had children, if you just ask her, like, how was your postpartum experience? She's probably going to say it wasn't that great because all that it really is that 6-week checkup and then you're done versus in midwifery care, it's usually completely different. But again, like my experience after I had my own pretty rough birth was like, I was like screaming out that I was having some issues, like that checklist thing that they make you fill out. And nobody said a word. And so therefore I internalized that and was like, well, I guess I'm the problem. Like I'm the one who screwed up. I need to like fix something because nobody's willing to say that anything's wrong with me. So I just need to figure it out. And I know so many women feel like that because again, it's like you were just saying, like it's just about the baby, which obviously is super important, but it's not just about the baby because it's a unit. It's that dyad that's so, so important. And if one side of that is not working well, then like neither is going to work well. And so I think that's, huge that we need to remember for sure. And I think it goes.
Can I comment on that?
Please do.
So when they say it's just about the baby, is it really?
I mean, it's not.
Because they say that, but it's not about intentions. It's about outcomes.
Yeah.
And if it's just about the baby and your outcomes are getting worse, or you're having more interventions and your outcomes are not getting better, is it really just about the baby? No, it's not. It's really about the bottom line.
Yeah.
And, it's famous in everything. It's about, always follow the money is what they say.
Yep.
But it's not just about the babies because obviously mother and baby are a dyad, as you said. And, if you have a great birth experience and you have healthy bonding and the partner's involved, you're much more likely to have a more successful child-rearing family life situation. And I wanted to briefly go back for one thing that you said earlier. It's really important that we talk about the first-time moms, because the first-time mom is where the trauma is inflicted almost always. It can happen later on. But one of the initiatives that we would like to see happen is we would like to see more teaching of young girls and boys about what's normal and about their bodies. Maybe in middle school or maybe early in high school, that we teach them so they can avoid the trauma of the fear-based obstetrical system that inflicts on first-time moms who don't know any better, and who are the victims of manipulation and coercion using the baby. Because one's greatest fear in life is something's going to happen to her baby.
Yep.
And if doctors tell you that if you don't do what I say, something's going to happen to your baby, then a woman is sort of just molded like putty into being compliant because they don't know better. But if women know better, then they can look at their doctor in the eye and say, "Oh, is that really true?"
Yes.
That's really true. I don't think what you're telling me is really true. Can you show me some evidence on that? Can you show me the data on that?
Yes.
And if we challenge doctors, my colleague Rick Safries, who's my co-author on a couple of my papers on breech and twins, she said it really well on a podcast recently. We were on a Triumphant Birth podcast with Jamie. And she said, if every mother goes to their doctor at their first prenatal visit and says, "What do you think about breech? What do you think about going past 40 weeks? What are you going to do if I rupture my membranes and I'm not in labor yet?" And just ask these questions and if they say, "Well, breech is dangerous," you say, "Well, why don't you know breech?"
Yep.
There are doctors who do breech deliveries. Why don't you know them? What's wrong with you? And just put the shoe on the other foot, and maybe politely, though, rather than coercively, make them uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
These are supposed to be professionals. They're supposed to know how to take care of all things obstetrics.
Yep.
They go through God knows how many years of training, 4 years of medical college, 4 years of medical school, 4 years of residency. If they do a fellowship, they do 2 or 3 more years beyond that. In the early 30s when they finish, they have lots of debt. They're supposed to know everything obstetrics. And if you take breech babies just by example, if you combine the number of breech babies in breeches and in 50% of twins, you're going to have at least 5% of babies at term that are breech. Yeah. That's 1 out of every 20 women that these doctors who are supposed to know all things obstetrics can only offer you a cesarean section. That is not evidence-based medicine. That is not good standard of care. That is not anything. Yes. That is it's bad. It's just, I'm trying to come up with a nice word. It's not the practice of obstetrics. And to call yourself an obstetrician and not know how to take care of 1 out of every 20 women that walk in your office. And I'm just picking on this one little narrow thing of breech and twins. There's so many other things about that doctors do. They think they're right. That all twins need to be induced at such and such a date, and all diabetics need to be induced at such and such a date. And no, they don't. No, they don't. And ultimately, if you just go back and read ACOG committee opinion number 667, doctors, right? You understand that the ultimate decision maker for anything is the decisionally capable woman.
Yes.
And we are supposed to give them information not skewed. There's always going to be bias in any information because every single person giving information has a bias. Yep. Just openly admit your bias, doctor. And then whatever the woman chooses, you should wholeheartedly support. Now, support could look like, yes, I'll help you with that, even though I'm not comfortable with that. Or support could look like, I'm not good at that. I don't know that. I'm embarrassed that I don't know that. But it's a reasonable choice. I'm going to send you to this person who might be able to help you.
Yeah.
That would be ethical and reasonable. That's not what they do.
No.
They say things like, "Oh, your baby's head will get stuck if you do a breech delivery," or "That doctor over there who does breech, he's crazy, she's crazy." That's what they'll say because the rationalization makes them feel better.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think it goes to a bigger conversation than just about birth, which we don't need to get into, but it's really about like the personal responsibility, the independence that you were talking about earlier. And it starts young. And so you mentioned teaching young girls about their bodies and young boys too. And I think that's so key. And I'm actually a fertility awareness educator as well. And so this is something that's huge for me, where it's like so many women that I talk to, even moms who've had like 8, 9 kids that I just worked with one who had 9 kids. She had no clue how her cycle worked. And that's exactly how like the industry likes it, because then it's just, she goes to them, defaults to them for information, when it's really like, it's her body. Like she deserves to be able to know what's happening inside of it. And so that's what I think, again, it's a much bigger conversation than just birth. It's really about like, yeah, we don't need to get into the weeds of it, but that's something that's really huge.
Yeah, it is. We all rationalize. We were trained to believe that medicine was honest, and we were trained to believe that your doctor had your best interest of heart. And in many cases, that is true. But in the current medical system, your doctor may have your best interest at heart, but he or she may not be able to express it to you, or they may not be able to help you with what you want. They may have to skew their counseling to funnel you down the path to get you to do what they want you to do. And that is the problem. It's not just, it's not simple. It's very complicated because the system is designed to be complicated. It's not designed to take care of the individual patient. When you listen to a commercial for a health system on the radio or on television, they make it sound like they care about you so much. I mean, Southern California, we have Kaiser, and their commercial, they're famous for saying, "We want you to thrive."
Yeah.
Do you really?
I know the employees probably do to some extent, but as a whole conglomerate, that's iffy.
Yeah, we want you to thrive as long as you follow what we tell you to do.
Yeah.
Right. Because obviously what we're telling you to do is the best way to thrive. And then you have to ask yourself again, is it a one-size-fits-all system? Are we all the same? You know, you talk about ultrasounds looking at babies, right? There's a wide variation between what's normal. Yet now they've labeled less than the 10th percentile in any measurement to be growth restricted. A growth restricted baby that's not the definition of growth restriction, but it certainly creates a lot of business for the maternal fetal medicine doctors.
Yes,
but are they saying that a woman who's 5'1" married to a man who's 5'5" should have the same size baby as somebody in the NBA married to a 6'2" female?
Yep.
Or should a Samoan baby be the same size as a Filipino baby?
Yep.
But the scale that they use in your ultrasound machine is a standardized scale. It puts everybody on the same scale. They don't have one for Filipinos. They don't have one for Samoans or NBA players. and they certainly don't have a separate one for twins. So if you watch what happens with twin pregnancies in the third trimester, they'll always tell you your baby's falling off its growth curve. Well, yeah, because you're using a singleton growth curve. It's so obvious that they're doing something wrong, and yet they don't see it. The doctors don't see it. They just continue to do it because they're lazy, because it's what's in the machine. It's what the machine prints out. So I'm just going to call you growth restricted, which then, by the way, means I can bring you back in 3 days and bill you for another $600. It's corrupt.
It is, unfortunately.
And I don't think they started out that way. I think the system is, corrupting. Whether they say power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. You have to understand that the system does not have your individual benefit as their primary goal. That is not their benefit.
No, for sure. And actually, some listeners know that I went through Billy Harrigan's, and we were talking about her earlier, her program, and she goes through the history of obstetrics. And if you're not sure about the history of obstetrics, it's infuriating. You should definitely go check it out. But it really is how it was set up from the beginning, where it's like, if you go back to like way back when, and women were giving birth in their homes. And then all of a sudden we had doctors, and the wealthy would send send for the doctor to come because the midwife was like not good enough and it had to be the doctor. And then from there it stemmed to the doctors have an office. So therefore the women can no longer give birth at home because that's beneath them. They need to go to the doctor's office, where that's like, then that means that they have status and privilege because they can afford this. And so right from the get-go, I mean, the whole system is just messed up. And you don't even want to get into like the methods that they used to treat other diseases and things like that the women had, but it's just insane. And so
no, Billy is very wise. She says birth is not inherently medical.
Yep.
And people should listen to her, listen to that podcast that you did with her. It's really good. I would just basically, we interviewed her on our podcast too, and she's just a genius.
Yes, she is.
She's eloquent when she speaks, and she makes really good sense. And I don't think that anyone, the reason people like her are banished or canceled is because they can't, not because what she's saying is wrong, but because what she's saying is counter to the narrative that the industrial complex wants you to have.
Yep. And it just makes sense. Like, it just makes sense. But okay, so shift gears a little bit. So there's numbers are everywhere, but approximately like 30 to 45% of women say or record that their birth was traumatic to them. And that can be because of unexplained complications, though that number is usually pretty small. Interventions, powerlessness during labor, postpartum, things like that. And so a lot of times, though, when people think about birth trauma, they think about like a physical injury, but it's really so much more than that. Like, it's about, like we were talking about, the mother's emotional health, relationships with baby, with their partner, long-term well-being. And it's really under-recognized and under-discussed. And so just a question about that. So from your perspective as an obstetrician who has embraced home birth, who like has literally been attending home or had been attending home births and is for patient autonomy, like, how do you think the medical system contributes or potentially alleviates any sort of birth trauma that women might experience?
Well, alleviating is an easy one because, yes, on occasion, the medical system does miraculous things. And we have to give them credit for when they do something that avoids birth trauma. And that's either physical or mental trauma. And sometimes they do the right thing. The problem is, it's a terrible analogy, but a broken clock is right twice a day too. So it's not so much that they do something good. It's when they're doing it to people who don't need it, what's happening. And you end up with, I think this 30 to 45% number is probably small. And I just think a lot of women are not going to respond to surveys or whatever else. They're too busy, and they may have had some trauma, or somebody spoke to them with disrespect. They don't consider that to be trauma, but it'll keep coming back in their mind periodically. Every time they think about the birth of their baby, they're going to think about Nurse Ratched saying something really mean to them, or that sort of thing. So there's just so much room for trauma that I think that number underestimates what's going on. So we're talking about emotional trauma, women who basically feel that word disempowered is overused, but it's really true, feel dismissed. Their partners are pushed off into the background in a third wheel. They feel like they were abused and their partner did nothing, and that so they feel like they don't look at their husband or their partner the same way that they did prior to that, and the partner doesn't know what to do, and there's just I don't know, there's just a lot wrong with the system, and it's built in by design, and I don't know that if you stay in the system that you can avoid it, because it's innate to how they think that birth itself is a medical, pregnancy itself is a medical condition. So they're so worried that you're going to have a problem that they're going to do things or project things upon you, and not concerned about it, because ultimately doctors are taught that famous old line that says, well, at least you got a healthy baby. That famous line that your listeners have probably heard 1,000 times. It's not about that. It's about so much more than that. This is a life event of immense proportion. It's probably the most important event in your life. And every woman loves her baby, but most women, I would say, do not love the process by which they gave birth. Going to the doctor's office feeling a little bit nervous, coming out of the doctor's office feeling more nervous. What does that do to the developing fetus when you're constantly told something is wrong? You may have a 20-week scan where everything is normal except they saw one little echogenic focus in the heart or one slightly dilated kidney. And they tell you, your baby looks great, but there's this one little thing, so let's come back in 6 weeks and take a look at that.
Yeah.
So then the woman didn't hear the part about the baby looks great. All she heard was there's something wrong with my baby's kidney. And for 6 weeks, she's worried about it. And 6 weeks later, she comes back and it's fine. And by the way, even if it isn't quite fine, what do you do differently?
Yeah.
There's nothing to do for it. Yet the doctor tells them that, yes, it's part of informed consent, but it's the way they're spoken to.
Yep, for sure. I think that's what you just said is huge. It's the way they're spoken to. Because I had one client, she had a home birth, everything went fine, but she was like, I think it was the midwife. She like looked at her in a certain way and like said something that just like really stuck with her. And like really, she couldn't get out of her head because again, like what you just said, the way that she was spoken to just did not help her to feel that this experience she just had was beautiful and like sacred. It really was more of just like somewhat transactional is how she described it. And that's really sad. And it really stuck with her for a long time.
And every woman is individual. So every woman has different life experiences. So we should not be judging them by our own life experiences. Let me give you digress and give you an example for a minute. I had a set of twins that was in labor, and it was breech vertex twins, which again would freak out 95% of OBs that they won't do that. And she was laboring at home, and she wanted a twin water birth. She came all the way from another country to Southern California to have her babies with me and my team. And she got to almost completely dilated. She was in transition, and she got up to go to the bathroom. And on the toilet, you hear those famous words you never want to hear from the bathroom. Dr. Fischbein, there's something coming out of me. And my first thought was that she probably had a foot coming out of her, which would be perfectly fine. Mm-hmm. And she says, no, it's not a foot. I think it's umbilical cord. Right? So I go in the bathroom and there's like 12 inches of umbilical cord hanging out of her. It's 6 inches down and 6 inches back up. And we listen to the heartbeat, and the heartbeat's fine. So we get her off the toilet. We bring her back into the living room. We have a conversation about the fact that she's now completely dilated, but she's not ready to birth anytime soon, and the cord is hanging out of her vagina. So I talk about we could transfer you to the hospital, and they're going to do a C-section on you 100%.
Yeah.
Or I could do a breech extraction, and we could get the baby out now because we can't have you pushing for an hour and a half with the cord hanging out. It might have been fine, but no human being on earth can tolerate that.
Yeah.
There may be some granny midwives who would tolerate it, but you just can't watch the cord hanging out like that. It's too uncomfortable to watch. So she agreed to that. I did a breech extraction on the first twin. The second twin came out head first. Took care of her, went back and did her visits. At the 6-week visit was the last visit with me before they were going to head back to their country. They stayed in town for 6 weeks. We had more of a discussion, and she was still very upset about her pregnancy, about her birth, excuse me. Even though she got a vaginal birth of both twins, and probably, not to toot my own horn, but I was probably the only physician in all of America, or most of America, that would have gotten her a vaginal delivery with a breech first twin with a prolapse cord.
Yeah.
She didn't get what she wanted. What she envisioned was having this beautiful birth in the water, both twins, like maybe she'd seen on Instagram or imagined all her life. I have no idea. And even though she had a perfect outcome, she was still traumatized. And that was very helpful for me in understanding that it isn't about just necessarily the outcomes. It's also about what's in their mind, with respecting their wishes, and some things are beyond our control like this. because she was on her way to get the birth that she wanted. And then nature intervened. But, from an outside person looking at that, they would say, well, why are you complaining?
Yeah, for sure.
But I understood perfectly. If I had still been the medicalized obstetrician that I was in my first 5 or 10 years of practice, I would have probably, she told me that, I would have probably gone home and told my partner or something, this woman's out of her mind. She has no idea what I did for her.
Yeah.
But I realized right away that I empathize with her completely. I still feel good about the fact that I was able to have the skill and the training to do what I did, but it wasn't what she wanted.
Yeah.
And that is never considered in the medicalized birth model.
Yep.
It just isn't. So traumatization can come in so many forms.
Yep, exactly. And again, like you could have a you could have a C-section and the woman be completely fine with that and have zero trauma at all. And then you could have a home birth, like you just said, that feels really traumatizing. So it really is really individual based off of the woman's past experiences. But okay, you mentioned something that I want to touch on, which is the men's role in pregnancy. So this is something that I feel like is not talked about a lot at all. And so I'd love your perspective as a man. Like, what do you feel like is the man's role in pregnancy and birth in relation to the woman giving birth? Like, what's the man supposed to do? How can he support her? How can he maybe get over some of his own fears around certain things around pregnancy and birth?
The traditional role of men in society has always been protection.
Yeah.
And safety and breadwinner. Mm-hmm. That's sort of the thing that makes men feel good about themselves, is I'm protecting my family and I'm a good breadwinner. Mm-hmm. I know this is true in obstetrics too, because when I would meet couples for their first visit for a home birth consult, talk for an hour, and I would bring the men into the conversation, and their two most biggest concerns were safety and cost. And is it safe? All right. So, because they want to protect their woman, they want to protect their family, they want to protect their baby. It doesn't take studies to tell you what common sense can tell you. For instance, we know it's safer to cross the street when the light is green than when it's red. You don't need a safety study, a randomized, double-blinded, controlled safety study on red lights and green lights, which you couldn't do, but you don't need that.
There is one.
It was the same thing here. When a father is part of the process, it's just much more likely that father is going to feel worthy and strong, and wife is going to have more respect for him, because ultimately that's another huge thing that men want from their woman, is to be respected. And so when they're part of the process, it strengthens the bond of the family unit. And again, you don't need a study to tell you that. It just does. They're more likely to be a good father, a good husband, and to stay in a marriage if they've been part of the process. So what does the hospital system do? The hospital system, first of all, puts dad in some silly outfit with some silly hat on his head. And they when they go to the OR or something like that, they do it. Make them wait outside. And then in the hospital, they're pushed aside a lot. They're not focused. There's no eye contact generally with the husband. So the husband feels disempowered. There's that word again. The husband feels emasculated. And as I said earlier, the woman sees her husband being emasculated and not standing up for himself, and that changes the way she looks at her man. So the family unit is really what keeps everything together. I'm very traditional, old-fashioned. I know that there's a whole new wave of people that think, women need men like a fish needs a bicycle or something. Like there was a famous. By the way, I found out where the quote came from. Do you know where that quote came from?
I do not. No clue.
It was an advertising campaign for Guinness.
In what year?
The Irish beer.
Yeah, what year? Do you know?
It was probably in the 90s.
Oh, well.
Yeah. So it was because I toured the Guinness factory and they have a whole display of yeah. A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. They have this fish riding the old fashioned tricycle on automated thing. It's the history of their advertising.
My mind goes to Dr. Seuss, but maybe that's just because I have 5 little kids and we read Dr. Seuss a lot. The fish riding the bike.
But maybe that was the origin of their thinking of their advertising department. Anyway, so we need to include the men. The men need to be included.
Yeah.
Again, the men need to be included as much as the woman and the man want to be included. So this is something that should be discussed at the very first visit.
Mm-hmm.
How do you want to be involved? How do you see your husband's role in your pregnancy and your birth? How do you see your role in your wife's pregnancy and birth?
Yeah.
And have the conversation right up front and don't just expect them. And that was the beauty, again, of the midwifery model, the wisdom of midwives is that, again, no midwife is going to get rich being a midwife because they can't do volume. So I'm talking about traditional midwifery now. I mean, midwifery's been captured and some of it's been medicalized now, and midwives are just working. Again, now they're employees working shifts, which destroys some of the beauty of medicine. But an hour-long prenatal visit gives you the time to discuss these things and to incorporate them and to make sure that the husband's involved. And we, in our practice, it would even work around the husband's schedule. So if he was working, we would sometimes have a 5:30 appointment.
Wow, that's awesome.
But we wanted to go home too, but we'd have a 5:30 in the afternoon appointment, normally we take our lunch hour, but we would, if he's free during the lunch hour, we'd move our lunch hour and we'd have the appointment when he can come.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So it's an integral part of the relationship. And again, if it strengthens the bond, it's better for mom because mom feels safe. And you know the whole story about how mammals need to feel safe when they're pregnant and going into labor. When they don't feel safe, first they don't conceive. But once they conceive, if they don't feel safe, then they're secreting stress hormones constantly, which has to have an effect on the development of the fetus and the epigenetics of the fetus. And then, of course, if they don't feel safe, they're not going to go into labor, or they're going to have a dysfunctional labor. In a horse or a deer with a dysfunctional labor, nobody's rushing, nobody takes the time. Eventually, they'll find a safe place and they'll probably be okay. In humans, because we have time limits, we're pushing things along. If you have a dysfunctional labor, that's going to start you on that cascade of interventions.
Yes, for sure. Definitely. Okay.
It's intertwined.
It really is. And I use a lot of nervous system regulation in my programs because, I mean, that's really what it all comes down to is safety, feeling safe and flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. Where are you in that? And I give the example of like a cat giving birth and like maybe she goes under the porch and then something comes and she leaves and goes somewhere else. But again, like in the traditional model, what we have right now in the hospitals, that's not possible. Like you can't just leave and go somewhere else. Like versus if you're in your home and you don't feel certain, most people feel safe in their home, but if you didn't, you could always leave and go somewhere else. So it's just again, we do have to remember that we are mammals. We are.
If you want to focus on trauma, you're right. It's throughout the pregnancy, but the hospital is it's geared toward trauma. Let me digress for just a second and ask you to sort of analyze this.
Yeah.
I have a saying that from the moment you drive to the hospital in labor to the moment you put your baby in the car seat to drive home, pretty much everything that's done is antithetical to nature's design.
It really is, yeah.
So you go to the hospital, you are asked to fill out forms. You're asked to go into the bathroom, pee in a cup, put on a hospital gown. Hospital gown signifies that you're a patient. You're brought back into the bed. The bed is the center of the room. If anybody's ever been to a home birth, how often do they find the woman laying in bed? Almost never. But in a hospital, that's where you're put. You put belts on your belly. They start an IV. They draw your blood. They ask you a series of questions, maybe while you're contracting every 3 minutes, and they're asking you questions that are mundane, that don't mean anything, like how many tattoos and piercings do you have? And because they have an intake form that, by the way, is the same intake form that you'd be asked if you were coming in with an appendicitis. Yeah. Any other medical. It's the same intake form. There isn't a specific one for a hospital. They do all these things to you. I could go on, but I'll just summarize by saying any of the things I just mentioned done for the benefit of the mother.
Well, absolutely not. And then they wonder why labor stalls. So
Contracting every 3 minutes at home, you get to the hospital after all these things they just did to you. Now your contractions are 7 to 8 minutes apart, and they can't figure out why.
Yep.
But it doesn't matter because they do an unnecessary vaginal exam on you, and they find that you're 3 to 4 centimeters dilated. And they say, well, even though your contractions are spaced out, you're far enough along. Let's just speed things up.
Yep.
So let's just break your waters, or let's just start Pitocin, or let's do no. Go home.
Yep.
Go home. Come back later.
Yep, for sure.
Ideally, you don't come in the first place. Ideally, you don't have a doctor who tells you the minute you have contractions 4 minutes apart, for an hour, lasting 60 seconds, that you come in. No, you ideally, every woman should have somebody at the home who can help them decide if they want to have a hospital birth, when to go in. Because the biggest problems that happen in the hospital is you come in too soon.
Yes, for sure.
And the hospital doesn't want you sitting around laboring for hours and hours and hours. They're a business. They need the rooms. They have to empty the rooms. So they move things along. How many of you have heard the statement that you're not moving fast enough? Well, fast enough for who?
Yep.
Whose standard are we talking about? Why is there a fast enough? Yes, on rare occasions, there are things that need to be done. But I already explained the Fischbein curve. Fischbein curve is so flawed, and yet it's standard in almost every hospital labor and delivery unit. Mm-hmm. But it implies that 50% of women are moving too slowly. That's insane.
It is, yes. Well, and on that note of the hospital forms, just again, little personal story here. My second baby was precipitous labor, so about an hour and a half-ish. And I made it to the hospital literally minutes before he was born. So I did not sign any of the papers. And this was, again, before I knew about home birth or anything. Did not sign any of the papers. I was in the intake, or whatever they call it.
Triage.
Yeah. And actually, I wasn't even triage. I was able to walk in, and I sat down to get checked in. And I told the lady, I was like, I feel like I need to push. And she was like, well, you can't do that here. And so I was put on a wheelchair and taken upstairs, had the baby, wild clothes and everything. And then everything was fine. And then about 30, 45 minutes after he was born, nurses come in. And this is a small hospital. There's no OBs on site. And so there were just nurses there to help. But again, after about 30, 40 minutes after, they bring over this stack of forms. And they're like, you need to sign all of these. And I'm like, but he's already been born. Why do I have to sign all these things about what I want, all these different forms? And it was just so funny because afterwards, when we got the bill, it was what I had signed was they were able to then bill for things, even though none of those things actually happened. And it was this is infuriating. How is this allowed? So again,
it's corrupt and it's criminal. And again, the system encourages upcoding. The system encourages. If you want to change, this is a different topic, but it's related. If you wanted to change the medical system, the way to do it would be to change reimbursement. That would be the first thing to start, because it's basic economics.
Yes, it is.
If you subsidize something, you get more of it. If you tax something, you get less of it. So if they get paid for the more they do, then they're going to do more.
Mm-hmm.
If they got paid for the less they do, what if there was a code for not giving hepatitis vaccine? And you could bill the same amount as you could bill for giving hepatitis vaccine.
Yep.
Would hepatitis vaccine be so important?
Absolutely not. Only those who actually need it would get it.
And what if the hospital got paid X number of dollars for every delivery they did if their C-section rate was above 30%, and they got paid X plus a number of dollars if their C-section rate was below 20%?
Yep.
Suddenly, maybe VBAC and breech and things like that might be more. Now, should we have to do that to get people to do stuff? No, but ultimately, that's the only way in a system that is so financially and medical legally concerned about things. It's the only way you're going to get it to change. Some people say we should get rid of the system completely, and I'm not against that, but I think it's short-sighted because obviously 10, 15% of women are saved, or not necessarily saved. That's a terrible term, but they need what the hospital has to offer.
Yep.
So if you got rid of the hospitals, where would those women go? So there would be no problem, because a hospital cannot keep its doors open if it's not financially viable.
Yep, for sure.
But it is criminal and crooked to do what they did to you, which is bill for things that they didn't necessarily do, or do things so that they can just bill for them.
Yep.
Like all the things I mentioned when you first came in. Did you really need to pee in a cup, have your blood drawn, and get an IV? No. Some women do, but this is a standard protocol. Again, there's no thinking, like the woman who said you can't have your baby down here. Well, what were they going to do if you just sat on the floor and had your baby?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so impersonal. I mean, maybe she was really nice, and maybe she ran and got you a wheelchair or whatever to get you upstairs or whatever. I don't know. But maybe she just sat behind her desk and made a phone call and just kind of kept on with her business. I could just see it. I mean, you can just see the indifference.
Yes.
It's not my job.
Yep. I know.
Yeah.
And again, it's a bigger story than that. I won't get too much into it, but yesterday we were at a store, and one of the things, like the checkout thingy wasn't working, and the worker was standing right there. And I'm like, she going to offer to help or anything? But it's like you said, that indifference, because she gets paid no matter if she helps us or not, because she's just like, that's her job, is to just stand there and make sure that nobody steals anything. And it's bigger conversation. But okay. So,
well, you know what it is though? It's because as things get bigger, they get less personal.
Yeah, for sure.
That's why the midwifery model, again, is so valuable when it's the traditional midwifery model. Mm-hmm. Once you start having midwives in a large group working a shift, then the care is going to get less personal.
Yeah.
It's human nature. It's not something that you can deny. It's human nature. We only have interest in things. We have more interest in things that are within our line of sight. If our family member's in trouble, we're going to help them out. Yeah. If our neighbor's in trouble, we might help them out. If a stranger in another city is in trouble, what are the chances we're going to help them out? Almost none. Yeah. So we care about the things that matter to us. And when you are not self-employed, when you're not running your own business, you don't care as much. We know that productivity in an assembly line goes up when the employees are offered profit sharing. Mm-hmm. If they're not offered profit sharing, then it doesn't go up. The minute they're offered profit sharing, they have a stake in the game, and therefore they work harder, they do better, they might be nicer to each other, who knows? But that's again, not one of those things that needs a study, although there are studies on that. But it's common sense. It
is. It really is. Unfortunately, though, a lot of people don't. Yeah, they can't make sense of common sense. So, all right. So you've had a very interesting career where you've gotten to see so much, and you started out, like you were saying, in the hospital, and then moved into home birth, and now doing Reteach Breech and all these different conferences. It's so cool. So looking back on your career, what do you hope your legacy will be in the field of obstetrics and maternal care or maternity care?
I love to hear stories about people who took my course or the Breech Without Borders courses, and then they write us and tell us that they had a breech butter birth, or that they offered a woman writes to us at 37 weeks from a city in another state and says, my doctor says I need a C-section next week because I have a breech baby, or I have twins, and he wants to induce me at 36 weeks or whatever else. And I give them information. I give them options. They take the initiative to find somebody. They have the birth that they want. It changes their life forever. It changes their kid's life forever. It changes that baby's life forever. It changes their partner's life forever. And there'll be ripple effects, because that story will then become part of that family's legend. And this is the way we affect it. So I never saw myself publishing papers. I always wanted to just be that private doctor. I got a lot of ego and benefit from seeing these results, obviously, because obstetrics is not a field you go into, one, to get rich,
Yeah.
or two, because you want to have a good life, because you don't.
Yeah.
Now they've changed it where you're working a shift and you're on and off. But when I was a doctor, I was on call for myself and my clients 24/7. So I would like to see that legacy go, that we're changing the way that women perceive birth. And I really think that and to teach the breech and twin skills and keep them alive.
Yeah.
Because if there weren't people like me and Breech Without Borders, these skills would pretty much be dead.
Yeah.
There would be some traditional midwives that do them, but even midwifery schools now are becoming medicalized. They're not going to teach it. OB residency programs are not teaching it. It would have become a dead art.
Yeah.
So keeping that legacy alive to eventually put the pressure on the medical system where maybe that will be brought back in again and women will have choices. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing we talked about earlier is somehow figuring out a way, that's the next project that I have, to educate young women and men about their bodies so they're not so easily manipulated by the medical industrial complex.
Yeah.
I mean, do you need all these vaccines? Do you need an annual pap smear? Do you need an annual mammogram? Do you need all the things that the medical system's offering you? And the data shows that actually, for most cases, that's not the case because it doesn't improve outcomes. We've had all these interventions and outcomes have not gotten better. So I want to make sure that people understand that. They start questioning their doctors. Because if you start questioning the doctors and questioning the system will have to adapt.
Yeah.
Now, they may adapt with more tyranny, which is sort of what happens to tyrants when they feel their power is slipping. They don't suddenly say, you're right. I was really a bad person. I'm going to walk away and let somebody else do it. No, they become more tyrannical at first. And we're seeing the pushback now. We're seeing many states trying to legislate now midwives more and more and more. That's because they're being lobbied by the big industries who see these trends as a threat to their power and their financial success. And so you can see that when they start to push back like that, when they start to do things that seem irrational, it's just a sign that they're in trouble.
Yeah.
And I feel like we can do better. And then the problem is this is a worldwide problem. And we in the United States are better off than most other countries. Most other countries have higher C-section rates than we do. I was shocked to find out that in 2023, I think it was, that the C-section rate in England was 39%.
I know, it's wild.
England. Everybody thought England, my God. They've got integrated midwives in their system.
Yeah. They
have home birth, hospital birth. A midwife can take care of you at home. And if you go to the hospital, a midwife can continue to take care of you.
Yeah.
That's a great model. And yet their induction rate's over 30% and their C-section rate's 39%. That doesn't bode well for those moms, those babies, and our future. What are we doing to the future of our children? So that's what the legacy that I would like to do. I've got a couple books in my head. I'd like to write. I don't know that I will. Right now, I'm really enjoying being out of Los Angeles, living in a small town, and doing small town stuff and taking care of property. I used to love gardening and taking care of my yard, and then for about 17 years, I didn't have a yard.
Oh wow!
And but now I have weeds to pull and tomatoes to grow and a lawn to mow, and I travel. I teach. I love the teaching. I think that I love that to be part of my legacy is that I train many, many midwives to go out and the ripples to go out and do these things and save. You can't save them all, but save one family at a time.
Yeah. Well, you already are doing so much of that. So it's already, such good work. Such good work. So just the last question as we wrap up that I always ask all guests is, what do you want the discerning mother to know?
I would like the discerning mother to know that She has choices. She may have to search them out. She may have to look. That her body works. It's marvelous. It's beautiful. That the medical system is useful in a very small number of births, yet they're doing 98% of them.
Yeah.
So midwifery care, even if you're planning a hospital birth, finding a traditional midwife, having some prenatal visits with that midwife while you're seeing an OB. If the OB gets upset because you're seeing a midwife, then understand that that is not the OB that you should be going to. Realize that you have choices. You are the consumer. You have the power. One of the things I tell women all the time, don't just pick your OB because he or she's been doing your pap smear for the last decade.
Yeah.
Find somebody who maybe in your community through your doulas or your midwives or your friends has a really good reputation. And your very first visit with that person, don't sign any documents. Don't let them draw any blood. Don't take your blood pressure. Don't do anything. You're going in there to interview that person, and you're going to ask them the questions and see how they respond to you. Do they give you the time? Do they look you in the eye? Do they have their back to you while they're typing into their electronic medical record system? Ask them again what I said earlier. What do you do if I go past 40 weeks? What do you do if my baby's breech? What do you do if my waters break before I'm in labor? Ask these questions. There's an important question.
Yeah.
How many people are in your call group? If I really love you, what's the chance you're going to be there when I'm in labor?
Mm-hmm. That's huge.
You could ask the sillier questions about what's your induction rate, what's your C-section rate. But if they're very embarrassing, doctors are probably going to lie. So it's hard to know. And hospitals don't publish that data. You can find out what the C-section rate of your local hospital is. That's published and online. But you can't find out what the C-section rate of individual doctors are. That's proprietary information at the hospital. Unless you know somebody in the OB department that can figure it out for you. So, yeah, just keep your power. Keep your power. And understand this is just such a beautiful, sacred thing that it's going to be with you, the memory of the whole process and the birth of your baby and the sharing with your partner and the bonding that can occur are going to be with you your entire life.
Yes. Yeah.
You can talk to a woman who's 80 years old and doesn't remember where she put her car keys anymore. May forget she may forget her child's name, but she'll remember the birth of that child. She will. It's just imprinted upon us. We want moms to have good memories.
Yeah.
When you're happy, your children are happy. The people around you are happy. The reason I say this is because when doctors don't treat women nicely or with respect or they're condescending, this is not what happy people do.
Yeah.
So you can be damn sure that your doctor is unhappy. And why is your doctor who wanted to do this maybe for years or maybe just picked it when he was a medical student, would he want to do something that makes him unhappy? No. So something happened in the process that make them unhappy. And I would think that most of my colleagues are not happy because most of my colleagues don't treat women with the respect that they deserve. They're very condescending and very overpowering. And they're very authoritative. And they think that what they say goes. And when a woman doesn't follow what they say, their ego is affected by that. And then they respond with sort of being snippy. And happy people don't do that. Right? They just don't.
Yeah.
So doctors should rise up too. Nurses should rise up too and say, this system sucks. I don't want to spend the next 35 or 40 years being unhappy, going to work every day and hoping to dodge a bullet.
Yeah.
And all that matters to me is a live baby in the basket. I know better than that, but that's what the system wants me to do. So that's what I'm going to do. Quit. Go make sandwiches. Go trim hedges. Get outside. Do something different if that's the way you feel about it. Leave it to the people that want to do it right. And we need to revise the way we're trained. And we need to take it away from the maternal fetal medicine specialists, the ones that run almost every residency program. Their whole society has been corrupted. Now, there may be, again, wonderful individual maternal fetal medicine specialists. But I have some that I talk to on Instagram, and we're always defending what their system is doing. And I say, you're backing the wrong horse. You yourself are doing this, but think about what most of your colleagues are doing.
Yeah.
Most of your colleagues are following policies and protocols that don't make sense, but do generate revenue. This has to stop. We need people who see birth as a normal part of a woman's body and a normal function in nature to be the ones training the next generation of those of us who are going to help women through pregnancy.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So good. Well, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing so much of your wisdom with us. It's so appreciated. So good. Definitely going to have to listen to this episode again. So again, thank you so much for being here.
Brigid, thanks for having me. And also for any of your listeners, when you have something like breeches or twins, take a deep dive. Don't just trust what you're being told. Because I have found that most everything I was taught about breeches and twin, or that's standard in most hospital systems, is actually wrong. Yeah. It's not even supported in the literature. So because that is my passion, it's my, I'm sort of an idiot savant when it comes to breeches and twins. I really think that those of you who have that, and that's going to be 5 or 6% of you, do your homework, look into it, and don't wait till you suddenly discover at 38 weeks that you're breech. This is the question, as I said earlier, ask the very first prenatal visit. And if your doctor is not comfortable with breech birth, maybe you need to look elsewhere.
Yeah.
I want to emphasize that point.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And definitely I will be linking your podcast and your website and everything as well. So if there are any, because I know I have a lot of birth workers who listen as well, so that they can potentially join in on a training that you do. I know you're all over the country and world, really. So
this year I'm saying put in the country. I'll be in Canada for the Reclaiming Birth Conference next month, but that's not a reteach breech seminar. I would love to see them. Bliss and I have a Patreon community. We have over 1,000 people now in it.
Yeah, that's great.
And we do review, we do Q&As. Bliss has a village prenatal. We post extra content. You can check into that. Everything's pretty much under Birthing Instincts. It's birthinginstinctspodcast.com, birthinginstincts.com, at Birthing Instincts on Instagram. I don't do Twitter or TikTok. I don't have the bandwidth for that.
I don't either. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I will. Well, how amazing was that? I just loved that conversation with Dr. Stu. It was seriously such a pleasure to hear his wisdom. And I just know that so many of you also know Dr. Stu and just love everything that he says and how he just supports women. I really, really hope that you enjoyed it. And if you found yourself really wondering, am I still being affected by my own birth? I have a quiz for you to take. It'll let you know where it is that you stand with your birth experience. Is it something that you're still kind of struggling with? Do you feel A-okay with it? Once you pop on over to the show notes, download the quiz, go ahead and take it, and just let me know what your results are. I'd absolutely love to hear from you. So again, thanks so much for listening to today's episode, and I'll see you next time.